Are we ready?
Yep, we are live.
We're going to start the February 2nd, 2021 County Administrator Issues and Update. Gary, take it away.
Thank you, Chair. Just because we're hybrid, in person we have Chair Smith and Commissioner Shull. Online as Commissioner Fisher, Commissioner Schrader, and Commissioner Savas. We'll start with legislative update. We have Sue Hildick and Chris Lyons from Public and Government Affairs. Please come forward. There were some memos in your packet for potential bill positions the county may choose to take. So, Chris, please go ahead.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is our first week of coming before you with bills, and there will be many more in future weeks. But for now, we have three to present to you for some feedback on positions. The first two are state bills. Representative Christine Drazen has introduced a resolution honoring Medal of Honor recipient Specialist 4 Larry Gilbert Dahl for his service to the country. He is Clackamas County's only Medal of Honor recipient. And as you know, we have our Circle of Honor out here dedicated to him. So there's actually a public hearing on that bill on Thursday. So we would recommend that we take a position on this one. It's a little unique, not captured by our legislative agenda. So happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Chris.
So actually, you're asking the board to take a position?
Yes.
So,
excuse
Commissioners, do
me,
you agree to
board.
take a support of this bill?
I'm sorry, I was reading something else. Board, do we have any objections? That's how we do, let's assume that we are in support of the legislation. And if anybody has an objection, go ahead and raise your hand and state that objection. How's that, Christine?
I
Okay.
don't see any hands raised.
I don't see any hands, so evidently we are in support of this. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, thank you. Second bill is HB 3055 relating to Highway Speed Authority. This bill is, this provision is part of an omnibus transportation bill and allows local governments to get authority from the state to be able to do speed studies and set speed limits on highways within their jurisdiction. The provision right now includes Lane County and Multnomah County, both of whom would like to have this authority, and we are recommending that Clackamas be added to that. DTD supports this, having this ability to perform speed studies. They would have to do it in accordance with DTD or with ODOT requirements and state law. So really, it doesn't change how things are done today. It just means we would now, Clackamas County would have this ability to do this. We have the staff to complete the investigations, but could complete them quicker than ODOT does today.
Chris, does this have to do with state highways and federal interstates only?
Just state highways.
Just state highways?
Yep.
So I-205, I-5 is not included?
Correct.
Okay, Commissioners, are there any comments?
Commissioner Schrader has her hand up.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Commissioner
I
Schrader.
support that. I just have a question for Chris. I mean, I know that our workforce board, I think it's Senate Bill 625 that's looking at a systems change to our workforce system is coming up. And also, I know that there's a number of childcare bills that are kind of on the docket. I know that Representative Power is the chair of that particular committee in Salem. So how do we bring this before the board to tag that maybe there might be some interest in supporting those bills?
Yeah,
I'm sure they'll come up at the Association of Work.
Yeah, we're well aware of the workforce bill. We'll likely bring that before you next week. And departments are still reviewing the nearly 1,500 bills that have been introduced. So over the next probably 2 to 3 weeks, we'll bring other bills before you, including the ones you've referenced. And if you have specific bills you'd like us to prioritize, feel free to just reach out.
All right, I'll talk to Tracy and we'll get some texts and emails to you guys, and then we'll bring it before the commission. Okay, thank you.
Are there any objections to supporting this? None? We support that. Chris, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And the third issue is a federal issue. You know that, and we discussed this with you when you approved the legislative agendas. Representative Blumenauer is working on a bill that will be introduced very soon relating to issues on Mount Hood. And There are a variety of things being worked on in a regional stakeholder group called Vision Around the Mountain, looking at access, safety, tourism, recreation, and stewardship issues. And some of what they're talking about will be included in this bill. So as you can imagine, it's very large, touches on a lot of issues. So we wanted to share with you some of the issues to see if you have questions or would like more information, and if so, if you want to identify any of those specific areas, we can bring those back to you in a policy session in the near future to talk more about them. So again, they touch on transit access around the mountain, traffic safety studies on Highway 26, the vision work on the potential gondola up there, relocation of the rest area at Government Camp, wild and scenic river designations, trail designations and restorations, stewardship and management guidance, and wildfire risk assessment. So those are just a highlight of some of the key issues. So no recommendation, just seeking your feedback on if you have particular interest to learn more about any of these specific areas.
Does any of our commissioners have a comment to make on this?
Yes, Commissioner Savas has his hand up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so just so my colleagues know, I sat in on one of the Vision Around the Mountain processes, meetings, and there were and are some pretty far-reaching, innovative ideas about how that would be. But some of them, what occurred to me was that some of that would be pretty costly to implement. So is there a cost or money associated with this, Chris?
I don't know yet. I would assume there are financial pieces to the bill, but I have not seen it yet to be able to speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of wonderful things in there as far as ideas, but none of them were truly, determined, or I won't say voted on or anything else. But so they're kind of lofty, as I recall leaving that last meeting here a few weeks ago, or maybe it was a little bit longer than that. But I'm just kind of curious as to, again, if there's money that's attributed to this, or if it means that other projects might be put on the back burner as a result of this. So just curious how that would be prioritized.
Commissioner Fisher has her hand up.
Yeah, I'm interested in keeping up on this and learning more. I don't know, I think I'll defer to chair and vice chairs if we should have a policy session. But Chris, if you could just get me whatever information so I can study up to understand what's happening and where all the different interests are and who's engaged, I would really appreciate that.
Yeah, we're happy to provide as much as we have to the commission.
And I don't see any other hands up.
I don't see any other hands. Go ahead, thank you. Keep bringing us information and keep us abreast of the status.
Okay, thank you.
Gary, what's next up?
Chair Smith.
I'm sorry, Sue Hildig, please
The
go.
other issue is our visits to the Congressional Delegation, which we usually do 2 trips a year, and the commission splits that up. This year, we'll be doing it on Zoom in late February and March. And all the commissioners will be involved over the course of the year in conversations with the delegation. We're recommending that Chair Smith and Commissioner Savas do the February and March visits because we know that transportation is going to be a key topic, and we know that there's a deep desire to relationship build with the chair from the delegation. So I just wanted to suggest that to you and see if we could get agreement to schedule those.
Does the commission have any comments regarding Sue Hildig's request?
I don't see any hands raised.
Sue, I think that's wonderful. Go ahead, and I appreciate you bringing that forward.
Sure, thank you.
Take care.
All right, thank you. Next, Water Environment Services Revenue Obligations. We have Greg Geist and Chris Story from Water Environment Services. Chris is in the physical room. Greg is in the Zoom room. So I'm not sure who's starting. Chris, you or Greg?
The county issued bonds last summer and got a shockingly good interest rate, below 1%. has started looking at perhaps accelerating a bond issuance schedule. We are currently issued to issue bonds. Is there a problem? Can you hear?
We can't hear Mr. Story.
Chris, they're having trouble hearing you. I'm getting
I think that's
feedback
because the
from
microphone
room.
got turned off. That is my fault.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. Can you start, Chris, I'm sorry. Can you start over?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
My apologies. My apologies, Commissioners. Good morning. My name is Chris Story. I'm the Assistant Director of Water Management Services, and this is an update and brief on a due diligence item that is for your review. And this is the background real quick. The county issued bonds last summer for a below 1% interest rate. WES was scheduled to issue bonds in about 2.5 years, and our current financial model projected a 3.5% interest rate for those bonds. And we ran the numbers and realized we could save between $6 and $7 million in interest costs by borrowing now at the much lower interest rates rather than waiting until later.
What is that interest rate, Chris?
We are projecting 1.5% or less.
Weehaw.
That is, of course, subject to the market, and we would have the pricing would be next week, presuming we get wrapped up on the preliminary offering statement due diligence review that's before you today. Whether that be the case or not, what we would do is look at the price, and if it comes in at 1.5% or less, we would move forward. We actually have access to some state revolving fund capital that is a bit more than 1.5%, but if it's much more than that, we would not go forward with the bond sale, because our target is to make sure that we get the lowest interest rate available for our ratepayers. We have a very aggressive capital improvement plan. It's on the order of $220-ish million. It gets updated every year over the next 5 years. So we definitely have lots of projects where the money will be put to. And the preliminary offering statement that was distributed to you is part of our due diligence requirement under securities law, because the issuance of these bonds, it's approximately $40 million worth, is issued under the direction of the Board of County Commissioners as the governing body of WES, and it has your names on it, as well as the names of Administrator Schmidt and Greg Geist and myself. So my staff and I, we've spent the last several months putting together this document, making sure we have accurate financial disclosures and risk disclosures, because this is a document that people rely on in making investment decisions. And we wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to review the document. And if you see anything, let us know so we can update it to make sure it is as accurate as possible. And that is the reason why it was circulated to you last week.
Any questions from commissioners?
I don't see any hands up.
Yeah, I do have one. Chris, just for clarity, I think I asked this before, but I forgot what your response was. And that was, is this, are we seeking this on behalf of the district and we're taking a district action, or are we doing this as a county on behalf of the district?
This is a district action. Water Environment Services is a separate legal entity and issues the bonds in reliance on ratepayer dollars only. There is no commitment or guarantee by the general fund or the county itself. And actually, I can preliminarily share, we have received a rating from Standard & Poor's that affirmed our AAA bond rating, which is the highest possible rating for our debt. We think that will help us indeed get that low interest rate that we're looking for.
That's excellent, Chris. Gary, is there action needed to be taken by us?
Well, Chris forwarded you an email last weekend asking if you had input on the document, so if you do, now's the chance to tell staff.
Staff, do you have any input on the documents? They're also in the, on our online brief.
I'm not seeing any hands raised.
I'm not seeing any, evidently you may go forward with this really wonderful deal, and thank you for bringing it forward.
Absolutely. And if anyone sees anything else, we'll be finalizing the document through this evening, and we'll publish it tomorrow morning. So if you see anything this afternoon, just go ahead and email me, and we will get that in the document.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Gary.
Great. Next, Americans with Disabilities Act Hearing briefing. Tomorrow you have your first ever Americans with Disabilities Act hearing, commissioners. Nate Boderman from County Council will brief you on preparing for that meeting tomorrow.
And then after Nate's briefing, I have a comment that I want to make. Thank you. Go ahead, Nate.
I'm bringing him into the room just
Okay, good.
now. All right. Here he is.
All right, good morning. Thank you, Gary. Chair Smith, Commissioners, good morning. Pleasure to be with you here today. As you know, we do have time set aside tomorrow for a hearing related to a grievance that was filed resulting from a request to use certain all-terrain and utility vehicles on county roads as ADA mobility devices. So the purpose of our brief time here this morning is simply to review the process that we propose to use for the hearing. I'll start out just by saying we're not able to discuss the merits of the case. That's what the hearing tomorrow is for. But because this is a new process for us all, we thought it would be helpful just to spend a few minutes covering how the hearing is set up so you'll have at least some idea of what to expect going into tomorrow. And first off, I'll just reiterate what Administrator Schmidt just said. As far as we know, this is a first. We've never had anyone file a grievance and a request to be considered by the board related to this type of action. The request originated out of the Department of Transportation and Development since it involves county roadways, but the county-wide ADA plan is really what we're looking at here, and it provides a grievance procedure that allows any aggrieved individual to file a complaint, which then requires the board to hold a hearing. This procedure is part of the county's plan that's been in place since, I believe, 2017. So it obviously predates this iteration of the board and even predates the current setup we have in the Equity and Diversion or Inclusion Office. And again, this is the first time I'm aware of this process being used. The county's ADA plan doesn't provide a specific hearing process, so we've had to adapt some of our existing processes to fit. So tomorrow, what you'll be doing is you're evaluating the merits of a proposal. Now, this is different than your role as a policymaker. We sometimes call this quasi-judicial process because you're performing a judge-like function, so to speak, in the sense that you're rendering a decision on the basis of the facts and the law. Most often you'll find yourself doing this in the context of land use proposals. So under the circumstances, we're proposing that we follow a process that's similar to that which we use for our land use hearings. What this does is it ensures the individual making the request due process by providing notice and the opportunity to be heard. So obviously we use this for our land use hearings. It is a form and procedure that most people are familiar with and has served us well over the years. Further to that point, I guess in advance of the hearing, what we've done is compiled materials for your review, which I'll touch on briefly. In the packet you should have received, you'll have a staff report, and that staff report helps frame the particular questions on appeal for tomorrow. First and most important is, I guess, in that staff report is attachments. The first set of attachments are the formal requests that have been made by the requesting party. Beyond that, we have the formal responses by DTD staff. And so you have not only the initiating request by the requesting party, but also the grievance request. Those have been attached as exhibits, and then the formal recommendations by TTD staff. So I suppose if you read one thing before tomorrow, I suggest this be it, because these are the materials that are most relevant to your decision-making tomorrow. We've also included materials that make up the record in this matter, as well as a table of contents summarizing what you'll find in the record. So if you do have questions about how staff got to this point, or how we all got to this point, or how staff arrived at certain conclusions, the supporting documents are in the record for your review. Moving on, in terms of what to expect tomorrow, you should have ample staff support at the hearing. I plan to be there myself in person. You'll also have representatives from Department of Transportation and Development, the Equity and Inclusion Office, and again, County Council. I've provided a draft script to help move the process along, but in a nutshell, what you can expect is a short staff report up front, followed by time for the individual making the request to explain his proposal to you. We've also provided time for others wishing to comment to be able to testify. And then once everyone that wishes to speak has done so, the board will have a chance to deliberate and make a decision. I want to stress again that this is a new process for us all. So if we do get into the hearing and you have questions, or if you simply need more time to review the materials and take the matter under advisement, we can arrange for a continuance of the hearing or some other procedure to ensure that you have time and are comfortable with the process, and those participating in the process have a chance to testify and answer your questions. I'll note we don't have ADA specialists on staff. As you can imagine, there's a whole sector of the legal profession and other professionals that deal with nothing but ADA law and disability rights law. What we have presented to you, we feel like is well reasoned and based on our understanding of federal law, the published federal guidance and applicable case law. But I just want to note here at the outset, if there are any questions that require a deep dive into the nuances of federal ADA law, we will need to take those under advisement and provide you answers at a later session. So we'll just keep that in mind. At the end of the day, the hearing process is supposed to provide a venue for folks to be heard and for you as a decision maker to gather all the relevant information and to make a well-informed decision. And if we can't get that done in one hearing, we always have the option of continuing the process. So again, keep that in mind. And perhaps I'll just leave that there for now, check in to see if anybody has specific questions. Again, keeping in mind that we shouldn't dive too far into the merits of the issue at this time.
What was that last remark, Nate?
Oh, just if you have questions on process, maybe now's a good time just to pause and answer those.
Oh,
but again,
yes, I would like to.
Keep in mind that we can't talk about the merits.
Yeah, I know that. So, Commissioners, this is my intent as chairing this, and this is a precedent-setting hearing for us. In the beginning, I would like Mr. Anderson to have full reign on expressing whatever comment that he needs to in support of his own case. I do believe that's very important. I believe he seeks his day in front of decision makers to try to make his case. With that in mind, I intend on letting commissioners ask any questions that are appropriate, of course, and express as much comment and commentary as they wish. No decision will be made by us tomorrow. This is, in my opinion, information gathering. I have questions. I've read probably 100 pages of the 197 pages that have been presented. I plan on finishing the rest tonight. I would hope all staff members would. I would hope all commissioners would. Well, I'm not going to say any more about that. I do think this is very interesting, extremely interesting for us, and we will have a lot of people in the room that I believe that can help us along. So I would suggest that we just kick back and we really take our time and be methodical in our questions, trying to arrive at a decision at a later date. With that in mind, do we have any commissioners who would like to speak?
I do not see any hands up.
Not seeing any hands up? Gary?
Okay, we'll move on. Thank you, Nate. And again, this will be tomorrow at 10 a.m., Commissioners. Next, 2021 Association of Oregon Counties dues. You all received a letter and invoice, Commissioners, and it's also in your packet. It is time to pay the annual dues to the Association of Oregon Counties for the current calendar year, January 1st through December 31st, 2021. I sent you the invoice. I'm seeking your approval of what you would like to pay because there's a menu of choices. Not all fees are required. There are some optional dues. I'd like to get your direction on what you would like to pay. If you indeed want to remain a member of the AOC, I assume you do, but what you'd like to pay. The total amount, including voluntary dues, is $118,292.24. However, many of those are voluntary. They are not required dues. So if I might like to go down the list and seek your approval to pay the line or not, if that would be okay, Chair?
Yes, please, Gary.
All right, so the general fund dues, which is required, is $83,840.20. Public lands fund dues, which is required, is $5,069.72. So those two are required to remain a member. Video lottery defense fund dues is voluntary at $4,754. I'll pause there. Would you like to pay those voluntary video lottery defense fund dues?
Commissioner Savas has his hand up.
Commissioner Savas.
So maybe the question I can ask first, Gary, is that what's our past practice?
Thank you, Commissioner. I should have answered that up front. For the past 3 years, it appears the county has only paid the required dues and the Federal Land Management Subcommittee dues, which is voluntary, for a total of about $93,000 to $94,000 over the past 3 calendar years. So that is your past practice. You paid the required dues, and you've added the Federal Land Management Subcommittee dues. You did not pay the other voluntary dues.
So Gary, would that be the 83,840 and the 5,069?
Yes, in addition to the Federal Land Management Subcommittee dues is $2,627,000, and then the Council of Forest Trust Land Counties dues, which is, also required, $553, and a voluntary assessment of $573. That also has been paid in prior years. But that's it.
Commissioner Savas has his hand back up.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I hadn't finished what I wanted to say, is that I just am inclined maybe just to do what we've done in the past and maybe save some time here this morning.
Okay.
So
Gary?
I'll make a motion that we just pay the AOC dues and fees that we have paid in the past year. Same ones and nothing more.
I'll second that.
There's been a motion made by Commissioner Savas, seconded by Commissioner Schrader. Gary, does that mean we are paying the entire $118,292 invoice and 24 cents? Could you explain
Yes.
for sure what we are paying on this?
So no, we would not be paying that entire amount. What we'd be paying, and Christina, can you help me with a calculator or someone just quickly? So we'd pay the general fund dues of $83,840, the public lands fund dues of $5,069, the federal land management subcommittee dues, which is voluntary, but you have paid last year and prior years, $2,627. The Council of Forest Trust Land Counties dues, which is required because we are a member of that, $553. And then the Council of Forest Trust Land Counties voluntary assessment dues of $573. That would be the total, which comes to, Christina?
$92,662.
Is right in line with what you paid last year. Yes.
Wonderful discussion. Thank you, staff. Wow. Any other discussion about this motion? I have one. Gary, we had decided to bring before the board the ONC County lands, and that is not on this invoice, correct?
Correct. That's a separate association. We've
Thank
already
you.
paid the dues for the current 6 months, and then the next payment will be July 1st for the next fiscal year.
And we can discuss that at a later date. Hearing no further discussion, Christine, please call the poll.
All right, Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Mute. Aye.
Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
and Chair Smith.
Aye, the motion passes. Gary,
Thank
up
you,
next.
Commissioners. Next, your 2021 State of the County event. The prior 4 years, the county has partnered with the North Clackamas Chamber of Commerce for your annual State of the County event, which has been held at the Monarch Hotel over the lunch hour, where anyone who's interested can come and for a fee, pay for lunch, or come for free if they just want to hear the speeches. And Commissioners, you would sit at the front of the room, and all 5 of you would make an opening statement, and then you just answer questions from the community. It's about a 90-minute event. Because of COVID, the proposal, if you choose to go forward, would still be to partner with the North Clackamas Chamber and to have an online Zoom event. This would be either this month in February or in March on a Wednesday during one of their lunch forum times. So my question is, would you like to continue partnering with the North Clackamas Chamber for your annual State of the County event? Or if not, prior to 4 years ago, we held our own event here in this room. You may recall, Chair Smith, when you were Commissioner prior, we did that. We found attendance was dwindling so much, we decided to partner with the Chamber, which is how we used to do it for 15 years prior to that. So I feel it has been a good partnership with the North Clackamas Chamber. The Clackamas County Business Alliance also joined in last year as a sponsor. But because of COVID, it would be a remote event if we were to go forward. So seeking your approval to move forward, or if not, what else, other options you'd like to do?
Commissioners, any discussion or preferences on whether you want to do this or not, or what forum do you want to use?
Commissioner Savas has his hand up.
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I found the partnering with the chamber to be a great thing, and I propose we continue that. Do you need a motion, Gary?
Well, that's what, Paul, let's see if any other commissioners want to make a comment.
I don't see any other
Don't see
hands
any?
up.
Go ahead, Paul.
Gary, do we need a motion?
I don't think,
Yes.
I don't think we need a motion,
Oh,
just a
okay.
head nod if you all agree.
So are we agreeing to go ahead and partner with the chamber, and it will be a Zoom event?
It'll be a remote
I'll say
event.
All thumbs up.
Yep, we'll do it, if possible, the end of February, if not early March. I'll coordinate with the chamber on a date.
Thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you. Next, your business meeting agenda review for this Thursday, February 4th. As of right now, you have nothing on the agenda because you have no consent agenda items because you did not meet, you had your retreat last week, so there were no session like today to pre-vet them. You have no public hearings. You will simply have a wildfire update and a COVID-19 update, and then public communication. Now, you do have a lengthy list of proposed items for consent agenda today, and depending on timing, some of those may request to go on this Thursday's agenda, which we'll find out shortly. But as of now, you have a very short agenda for Thursday's business meeting. Moving on, Chair Smith, you had asked to discuss reaffirming board communication commitments that commissioners made at your board retreat last week.
Thank you, Gary. During our board retreat that we, I thought was very successful, I thought, commissioners, you just did an outstanding job in defining, quantifying, and qualifying the issues and priorities for us moving forward for not only a year, but possibly 2 and 3 and 5 years. And out of that came some, because of our facilitator, who is very good, came some interesting actions that I would like to formally codify today. And they're just behaviors. One, some are behaviors, but number 2 is an actual regular order of business. And in that, we're going to try to do, number 1, the best we can. If we have an issue with a commissioner, speak directly to them, and that's called no triangulation. Number 2, conduct a regular order of business. Policy and votes follows issues. Policy then forward to the business meeting for a vote. And in that, of course, we have executive session materials that are brought to us by county council. And I believe the executive session, Gary, the procedure for that is from council. Can any commissioner want something discussed in executive session as well?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, that's fine. And any commissioner can request anything at this point. But the point of this is, in order for us to take a final action in any of our hearings or our business meetings, they must be either vetted at issues or at an executive session or at a policy session, and that's the reason for number 2. Number 3, be honest and respectful and fair to each other. And number 4, managing to no surprises. Do we have comments from commissioners on this?
Commissioner Savas has his hand
Commissioner
raised.
Savas.
Yeah, I'm pleased to go ahead and codify those somehow. I'm just figuring out what the best way is we could do that. You know, is there a resolution or is it, or, I mean, how should we do that? What's the best way?
I am wondering that myself too, Gary.
The last, 2 years ago, after your board retreat, you did agree to a set of operating guidelines, which it's on the other end of the table here. So we made it a little flyer, a placard for you that you agreed to. We discussed it at a policy session. I think you actually voted on it. So we did it through a policy session, and you codified it, agreed to it. We made it a document and a poster. So we could do that if you'd like, have a formal policy session. You could just vote right now if you want, and we'll make up a little poster for you to visually remind you of what you agreed to.
And I think this little poster is for commissioners. I don't know that it's necessarily for the public at large, although staff can remind us to follow this procedure, which I would appreciate, staff reminding me on what we're doing. So if the board has no objections, I will entertain a motion to adopt these behaviors and procedures. Mark?
There are,
So moved.
I heard 2 things. Commissioner Scholl moved, and Martha Schrader seconded the motion.
Yep.
Any more discussion?
I do have Commissioner Fisher and Commissioner Savas, both have their
Commissioner
hands.
Fisher, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would just, before we vote, just to see what we just discussed in writing, because I just want to make sure that we have a very clear understanding about what our regular ongoing business is, that we all are clear on what that means. And I appreciate, Chair Smith, you stating it verbally. I am a visual and auditory learner. I really would appreciate seeing it in writing. I think in concept, I'm good with it, but there are some other things that I think will help us move smoothly as well. And I think the no surprises can be challenging in the sense that we have obligations to not daisy chain. And so what my approach would be is to always seek to alert the chair if we know of something that could be a surprise, and then defer to our county council and our county administrator, because we don't want to get wary of what our statutory obligations are under the ethics rules. So those are just some of my concerns. I would just like to see it in writing and make sure that we're all clear.
Yeah,
about
Commissioner Fisher, and you make up a good point. I thought commissioners had this in writing, and I apologize. I have it in writing, but
Emily emailed it this morning to the commissioners, so you did get it, but granted, it was early this morning, so it was not
do we
prior.
want to take time to read this and then revisit it later in this meeting today? We'll move on. Commissioner Fisher, would that be okay? I don't know, I just don't want to have to commit you if you're uncomfortable.
Sure, I will be happy when we have a break to look at whatever Emily sent. And
All
then we
right.
could maybe just defer this to later this afternoon. That would be very good
Okay,
solution.
let's do that. And I believe Commissioner Savas has his hand up.
Yeah, the reason I asked the previous question about, how do we codify this is that we have done similar things in the past and had basically, a number of things that we've agreed for to how we operate and work with one another and so forth. And, I don't want to bring up the past, but we always haven't really adhered to those as good as we could have. So I'm just wondering if doing it in a resolution, or how do we go up one more notch to kind of say, you know what, we're going to be professionals. We're going to have good discourse and working relationships with one another. I just want to how do we strengthen it?
You could certainly do a resolution at a business meeting. We haven't done that recently, so that would be a next step you haven't taken before to help cement the agreement between you all. We could do that, sure.
Okay, what I would suggest maybe there's some other things that we've done in the past that we could put in there as well and make it fuller so it incorporates a number of the things that we have talked about before, and somewhat had rules of operation and so forth. And I don't have all those at my fingertips at this point, but maybe our policy coordinators, our advisors could look through that and make a recommendation crafting that.
The rules of operation, is that normally done through a resolution? And I'm not saying we can't, I just don't know what the procedure for that is.
Right, the agreements you came together last time, and again, it's right, I can't reach it, you just did it in a policy session, and we had themes that came from your retreat, you discussed it, you're so kind, Christina. That was the other one, please. You
Oh,
just did it
I
in a
see, the
policy
white
session.
paper, got it.
It's this one, so if the camera can see, it looks like this. It's this document we did at a policy session. It's called Board Commitment to Operate with Compassion and Efficiency. And it talked about ground rules, actions you take as a cohesive board, all that sort of thing. So if I may, Chair, what I'm hearing is perhaps we should do a policy session to further discuss what you did before, what you just came out of your retreat, how you want to codify it moving forward. Maybe we should do that. Sure.
And that's fine, I'm willing to do that. What do we do with the current motion on the table?
So I would say the mover and the seconder to withdraw your motion, if you're willing to do that.
Mark, would you?
I withdraw my motion.
And I'll second that.
And the motion that has been previously made withdrawn by Commissioner Scholl and Martha Schrader's second has been withdrawn. Let's go ahead and move forward to this. Each commissioner can have input in this and make sure everything is clear as we move forward. And maybe we take a look at that past document that you just held up, and maybe some of that stuff is no longer relevant. Maybe we're doing that fine. So
Yep.
if we add something, I'm always in favor of taking something off, would be my insistence on that only.
Got it. We will schedule a policy session to have a fuller conversation. Thank you.
Commissioner Fisher still has her hand up.
Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, just following up on what Commissioner Savas said about some of the things that we've done in the past. Commissioner Savas put forward, gosh, it's probably a couple of years ago, a nonpartisan resolution, which was really, I thought it was excellent. I think that's worth this board just looking at, maybe reaffirming that resolution. It's just something.
Yeah, well, just bring your ideas forward, and we'll just, decide what we want to do. That's fine. Okay.
All right, very good. We'll come back to it at policy session. Moving on, Commissioner Savas had asked for a budget status update. And I do have Elizabeth Comfort, Finance Director, who will help. But if Commissioner Savas, if you'd like to kick it off with what you are requesting, and we're happy to answer for you.
Yeah, sure. I just want to, I know that in our retreat, we weren't supposed to really talk about substance, that we were just talking about, our retreat and our goals and our priorities. So it wasn't proper to discuss it in, something that's really county business. So therefore, it was just a matter of weeks ago and prior, looking back, that, finance staff, the administrator had shared with us that we would have a structurally balanced and sustainable budget for 2021, 2022. So that I embraced. That's what I've been looking for a long time. We've all agreed, and we were moving forward. Since then, we had an election. We've changed. Here we are. It's January, and now I think I heard the administrator say last week in our retreat that we may not have a structurally balanced budget this year. That came as a surprise. So I'm not asking for a great detail, but is that really the fact, and what happened? Because I just think that's a big deal. It is a big deal to go from structurally balanced as something that would happen to we're not structurally balanced. And so that's my question.
Yep. Thank you, Commissioner. So I did say at your board retreat last week, we don't have a sustainable budget. And I did say that, although in prior statements I said we did. So I want to own what I said, and I want Elizabeth Comfort, our Finance Director, to help correct what I may have said inaccurately. So I fully own that words matter, and I may have said it incorrectly last week. I do want to say, so Elizabeth is here on Zoom to jump in just a second. I do want to say, I know you all know this, but because the public is listening, we have a balanced budget because that's required by law. We do not have a sustainable, sound, structural budget, meaning our expenses have in the past outpaced our revenues, although we are getting closer and closer to reversing that. So Elizabeth Comfort, our Finance Director, is going to clarify what I'm not saying correctly, because she is the expert and I am not, and I own that. So Elizabeth, could you please come on and answer Commissioner Savas's question and tell the board, do we have a sustainable budget or not moving forward?
Yeah, thank you, Gary, and good morning, Chair and Commissioners. And Commissioner Savas, you're asking great questions, and I would like to say that we do have, and I will say we are working on a sustainable operational budget. And I've asked Christina if she could pull up our forecast that we presented last month at the Budget Committee. And I want to just go over some highlights here. And I think this might help see where we've been and where we're going. If you can pull back out a little bit, Christina, so we can see all the way to the bottom. Just one more. Perfect. So there's only a couple of changes that we have on this live and living document, which is our forecast compared to last month that we presented at the Budget Committee. And those are just some items that every time we learn something new about a projected forecast, expenditure, like a debt, for example, our library buildings, we had a meeting with Laura Zentner of BCS, and we learned a little bit more about the timing and how much debt the general fund will incur. So we've updated that line, and that's towards the bottom of the page. The other thing we've updated since January is we are also pulling back some CARES dollars that the county's receiving in place of regular budgeted general fund dollars. So you'll find those in our projected column, which is the third one in from the left, in the other revenue. And so as we're learning more about our revenue and our expenditures, we're constantly updating this. So we just updated it again yesterday. So what we're talking about is operational. Can our revenues that we get for operational expenditures, can they meet or exceed those needs on an annual basis and looking forward? So the top grouping is our operational revenue. It's all the new revenue that comes in for the year. And so we can focus on the two columns of projected. That's this year's projected, how we're going to end. Of course, we're only 50% in the fiscal year. And then we also want to look at that forecast year one. So how do we think the next year budget is going to go? And then we forecast out 5 years. We're throwing the stone out there to see how far our dollars will go with what we know today. So going down to the second grouping is our operational expenditures. Those are our personnel, our material and services, our small capital outlay, the projects. And a reminder that this is just our general fund. So this primarily is talking about our property taxes that we receive in, and then what do those go to? We have multitude of other departments that have other sources of revenues that are not reflected here. So this is primary focused on the general fund property taxes and then state and local revenues as well. So as you can see that there is a net, it's called net operating income, or if it's in brackets, it's a loss. And that's what we look at for, is it a sustainable budget that our operations, our operating revenue meets or exceeds our operating expenses? Now, Commissioner Savas, you'll say, well, this looked a lot different, last spring. And it does, because with Sandra Montoya, our budget manager, her and I have really been poring over this to make it a very accurate and user-friendly document. And one of the things that was being included in the operating revenue were long-term debt expenditures. Those typically are not called operating. They're debt, they're larger expenditures, and they're not included in how do we function, how do we afford, and where do we spend our dollars on a day-to-day basis. So those are in the next grouping, which is called non-operating. So we've pulled those out of operating, and it paints a different picture. But going forward, we've also forecasted potential and rough estimates of the courthouse. So that's where you see those two columns that have the negative millions in red of 4 million and 6.7 million, because when we start anticipating, the ceiling of a forecasted courthouse number, that really starts to drain on the general fund dollars. Of course, we hope to correct that by the time we get there, either reducing those forecasted or making corrections and changes in our general fund usage, either increasing revenue or reducing operational expenditures. So right now with this living document, we are showing that we are operationally, structurally sound. And I will give credit to my predecessors. The last 2 years prior to me arriving, the county made significant changes and reductions of about $12 million. Last budget year, we made reductions of $6 million. So we have done a huge course correction over 2 years. And so that has contributed to the good numbers that you're seeing here. And also what we have with us now, as I said, we have a new budget manager, Sandra, who's very experienced and bringing her guidance as well, is we are managing our general fund differently than we have in the past. So we have a lot of moving parts and a lot of course corrections with how we're allocating the general fund, how we're pulling back any excess general fund that may have been allocated and then was not utilized. We're pulling that back. So there's a lot of good tools that we are using in our favor to keep monitoring this. So I'll stop talking now, but it's a real high level presentation.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, for that. I just want to just make sure we're on that I feel better now. I want to make sure that we are on a glide path to make those red brackets to no brackets and put us in the black going forward. And I know that's challenging, but I think we have a responsibility to do that early as opposed to making an abrupt change at the end, which can be traumatic. So thank you.
So,
I have a question. Excuse me, Gary. Elizabeth, could you provide some language for the board to use? You mentioned we have a sustainable operational budget, but I also heard some warning signs about spending. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's always the challenge. And there is one other warning flag I want to put out, is that our property taxes, for this fiscal year, we have received 1/3 or one of the distributions, and that was in November. We have another distribution coming this month in February, and we'll see how that collection is going. And then we have a third distribution in May. So without knowing what those two revenue distributions are to the county, we still are in a pause and wait. And as we're writing our budgets, we have to write those anticipating, perhaps a cut. We're not saying that there's going to be a cut, because right now the revenue has come in only 1% below our projections, as Tammy Little shared with us. I think that was last month, and of what the revenues have come in. So the warnings are, and the red flags are, we have to be very deliberate and intentional in how we're allocating our dollars throughout the county. And that's what we're embarking on, the outcomes-based budgeting, which we've talked about as well. That's very intentional allocation of dollars and looking at where the efforts and the resources of the county are being spent, program by program.
So our budget is sustainable, but is it really?
Every day we're learning. It's a live document. So as you see here in the forecast, right now we anticipate a sustainable budget. That's what our forecasts are.
Without any new spending or additional surprises that may be in the future, correct?
Correct.
And if we have those additional surprises, it could throw our budget out of whack.
Right, and then we would modify and adjust our course.
So we have to be careful, is what you're saying.
Absolutely, yeah.
Gary. Thank you, Elizabeth Comfort.
yes, thank you so much, Elizabeth. So to Commissioner Savas and the board, I'm sorry. I did not mean to confuse you. I did the best I could last week. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes, so I'm sorry if I use the wrong words to cause concern. But like Chair Smith just said, we are not out of the woods. The forecast appears that we're sustainable. We're on a path to sustainability. That's awesome. There are unforeseen circumstances that could occur, a natural disaster, hopefully not, continued COVID impacts. Our cost of doing business continues to increase. So as you all know, it's just we have to be really mindful and responsible of how we spend public dollars and always, always be diligent about that, which we are doing.
Gary, I think it's very clear. I think this is fairly clear now for the information we have today, and tomorrow it could change.
Right, yes. So thank you for that. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Commissioner Savas, for bringing the question. All right, Commissioners, if you will allow me, I'd like to hold on Commissioner Communications until the end. And next, we're going to go to the requests for consent agenda items. Again, as we'll do this, each department will come forward and give a very, very brief 5-minute or less update on the staff report, and then seeking board direction to put this on a future consent agenda. It will go to the February 11th business meeting unless I hear from staff it needs to go this week. So that, I'll ask you to tell me that when you come forward. We'll start with the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District. Approved trail easement agreement granted by Pedcor Investments to North Clackamas Parks and Recreation to provide for a portion of the future Phillips Creek Trail. I think Sarah is doing this, and she's online, or maybe it's Tom or Laura. I don't remember. Laura, Sarah, or Tom, or Allegra, any or all of them online. Actually, we're going to since Rich, we're going to jump forward. We're going to do H3S first, Health, Housing, and Human Services. 4 items. First, approval of an intergovernmental grant agreement with the state of Oregon, acting through the Oregon Health Authority for crisis counseling program services. Go ahead, Rich.
Sure. Good morning, Chair Smith and Board. So this is a revenue agreement, $762,335 and change. The agreement provides funding for crisis counseling program services in response to the pandemic.
Excuse me, Rich.
What's not on?
I'm
Can you
sorry.
hear me? Okay.
Can you repeat your?
I'm sorry, I was moving
just for the
fast.
record, thank you, Rich.
Sure. So this is a revenue agreement. It is approval from the state of Oregon, and what it's going to focus on is providing crisis counseling program services in response to the pandemic. These services will provide community outreach, non-clinical crisis counseling, resource networking, and referral services to those affected emotionally and psychologically by the pandemic. This is a SAMHSA grant coming through the state. And with that, I'll stop and see if there are any questions.
Questions from any commissioners?
I do not see any hands raised.
Gary?
Okay, we'll put it forward. Next, approval of an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Canby and Community Development Division for ADA Ramp Improvements Project.
Sure. So this is a little bit of community development that community development does in terms of using CDBG grants to improve the various cities across the county. And so the City of Canby will be bringing $22,000 matching towards this. We'll be using $110,000 in CDBG funds, and we'll do some work in Canby.
Any comments from commissioners?
I do not see any hands raised.
Gary?
Okay, thank you. Next, approval to accept a grant award with the Bureau of Justice Assistance for Adult Drug Court and Veterans Treatment Court Discretionary Grant Program. Go ahead, Rich.
Okay, thanks. So this is essentially almost $500,000 grant seeking approval to accept this grant award from the Bureau of Justice. The funds will be utilized to implement and enhance drug court services, primarily driving under the influence court to add and diverting individuals away from the criminal justice system and into treatment for substance abuse disorders. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions.
$500,000 grant for drug and substance abuse treatment. Did I hear that right?
You sure did.
That is wonderful. Any comments from commissioners?
I do not see any hands raised.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Fisher has her hand
Fisher,
raised.
go ahead.
Yeah, Rich, I'm just curious, because we talked about this at our retreat, that, you know, Oregon is 46th or 47th on the list of access to substance abuse treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So I am just curious where people will receive this services, and will they have to wait for it?
So essentially the services break two ways. So if someone's pulled over for a Dewey, there's an assessment done to take a look at what is the level of their substance abuse, and they're going to do some assessment. If it's a need for bed, inpatient treatment, then there is a waiting list, and that's where Oregon we struggle. If it's just straight up treatment coming in for their substance abuse, then it could go to any area provider. We have a contract with to do that work. So they could be eligible for the Oregon Health Plan, they could get care through Care Oregon, and then they would be eligible to receive services wherever appropriate. So the hang-up is available beds for treatment. And there it's just looking for a bed, and you wait until a bed is available, and then you plug that individual into that available bed. So that's sort of where we are, Commissioner Fisher. Anything else I can provide
Is
for
that
you?
okay, Commissioner Fisher?
Yep, just was trying to put some context around it. Thank you, Chair Smith.
Yeah. Christine, any other commission comments?
I see no other hands.
Gary?
Okay, finally, approval to apply for a continuation grant for Oregon Department of Transportation Rural Formula Funds for operations funding for Mount Hood Express. Go ahead, Rich.
Sure, this is $258,000 grant, and we'll be making application, and essentially what this is helping us do is continue our Mount Hood services. So it's the bus, and it will aid in increasing access to employment, recreation, shopping, medical services for residents and services. This is pretty much it in terms of transit on the mountain.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Any comments from commissioners?
I do not see any hands.
Gary?
All right, can they all wait till next week, Rich?
They can.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Next, we'll go back to North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District. It's Catherine Krieger who will present, and I knew that and I forgot, so that's on me. I'm sorry. Again, approved trail easement agreement granted by PEDCor Investments to North Clackamas Parks and Recreation to provide for a portion of the future Phillips Creek Trail. Catherine, please go ahead.
Oh, Catherine, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Chair Smith, Commissioners, and Administrator Schmidt. My name's Catherine Krieger. I'm the Planning and Development Manager for North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District. This item on the agenda is for approval of a no-cost easement. It's a small piece of property. It's about 20 feet wide and about 600 feet long. Staff wants to acquire it for a future trail, a future Phillips Creek Trail that is outlined in the Clackamas County's Regional Center Area Plan and adopted into its comprehensive plan. It's a future greenway that will provide an important linkage to other parks and trails, from I-205 multi-use trail to the from Oddie Road on the north to Harmony Road and Lake Road on the south, and has the potential to link to Mount Talbot on the east and the aquatic park on the west. It came about for us to purchase this piece of property, or not purchase, acquire this easement, because PEDCor Investments, an affordable housing developer, applied for design review in 2016, and we were asked to comment on the proposal. We asked for an easement for the trail as part of their condition of approval, and they agreed. This potential easement overlays PEDCor's property and a water easement owned by Clackamas River Water. Clackamas River Water Board has approved the easement earlier in January. And we are good with putting this on the February 11th agenda unless you have any issues with it. That's all I have, unless you have questions.
Any comments from commissioners?
Commissioner Savas has his hand raised.
Mr. Savas.
Yeah, could you repeat the dollar amount, please?
This is no cost easement. We will be responsible for building a trail in the future when more pieces of property are available to build it and it's a little bit more feasible.
Okay. I wasn't aware of this is all. I just found it. I'm glad it doesn't cost us any money, but I just wasn't aware of it. So I apologize to my colleagues as your liaison that didn't know anything about it. Thank you.
I don't see any other hands raised.
Gary.
Okay, we'll move that forward. Thank you. Next, Water Environment Services. And I think Greg is doing this. Christina? First, execution of a contract between Stantec Consulting Services and Water Environment Services for engineering design services for the Kellogg Creek Water Resource Recovery Facility, Influent Pump number 2 and 4 replacement project. Is it Greg there?
Yes, Greg is
Greg,
here.
go ahead.
All right, good morning, Chair Smith and Commissioners. My name is Greg Geis. I'm the Director of Clackamas Water Environment Services. We actually have 3 items today. I'm going to take the first 2. Chris Story is there in person, and he will take the third. We are going to request on the third item that Chris will be discussing that we get that on the consent this week if possible. The first item is to award a contract, design and engineering contract to Stantec Consulting Services for it's a $290,000 contract for design and engineering services for 2 new Influent pump stations at our Kellogg Creek facility. These are the large wet weather pumps. One was put in place in 1975, and the other was put in place in 1995. They're at the end of the useful life, and we can replace them with more efficient pumps. So we would like approval to do that. This project is currently funded in our approved 5-year capital improvement plan.
Any comments from commissioners on this?
I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, next, Greg, the second one, approval of a contract between Water Environment Services and APSCO for the Grit and Septage Pump Replacement Project.
Yes, so this project is a $240,000 construction contract with APSCO to replace 10 aging or 30-year-old grit and septage pumps that are at our Kellogg Creek and Tri-City facilities. We would do that over the course of 2 years, 5 this fiscal year, 5 next fiscal year, for a total of $240,000. This project is also funded in our approved 5-year capital improvement plan.
Comments from commissioners?
Yeah, I do have one question, Greg. What kind of a manufacturer's guarantee, warranty, whatnot, do we have to make sure that that the equipment lives a good life? I know we've had some situations in the past where certain products were purchased and we had unanticipated early failures. So I was just kind of wondering.
Yeah, well, it's built into the design and the engineering as well. We set expectations for performance when those pumps, whether they're the 2 new Influent pumps at Kellogg or the grit and septage pumps are installed, they're performance tested to make sure that they meet the specifications. There is some form of warranty. I don't know specifically what that is, whether it's a year or 2, or if we have done extended warranties on certain pieces of equipment in the past. I don't have the exact details on these 2 projects, but there are performance measures that they need to meet. And we've actually, for the Influent pump station pumps at Kellogg, we are standardizing on a particular brand, Flight, that has had a tremendous performance record in the past.
I don't see any other hands raised.
Gary?
Okay, so Greg, these 2, you can wait till February 11th, correct?
Yes.
All right, so the final one, approval of a resolution allowing for the reduction of interest collected on certain existing assessments for water environment services. Chris is now online. Chris Story, go ahead.
Morning again, commissioners, and happy Groundhog Day. Just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to share about this one in particular because we're hoping to
Excuse me, I can't hear.
Oh, you can't hear him?
I mean, am I the only one having trouble? I'm sorry.
It's very, it's tinny. It's very faint.
I apologize. Perhaps the low-quality microphone in my office.
It's Bill Murray behind you. That's what's causing it.
Yes,
Yeah.
distractions galore.
Yeah.
The short answer is that West put in an infrastructure for wastewater in the 80s. Each property was assessed an amount related to that infrastructure. Most have paid, some have not. 3 properties that did not pay at all have had interest running on them since the 1980s. Under the policy in place at the time, the interest rate was actually quite high, 12%. And at this point, the interest is more than 3 times the value of the assessment, and it has become a barrier for anything happening on those properties. The property owner has been approached about acquisition of those parcels and has asked if there's anything we could do. In a review, our other interest rates that we typically charge are much lower. So we are recommending to the board that we reduce it to 3% running from the time of assessment, which would write down as uncollectible a fair amount of interest, nearly $50,000, but would still collect interest and the original principal for the construction of the infrastructure and also allow development to move forward for these parcels, which is up in the Welch's area, served by our Hoodland plant.
Thanks, Chris. Any comments from commissioners?
I do not see any hands raised.
Gary?
All right, so Chair, with your approval, this will go on this Thursday's business meeting, February 4th, because of the urgency of it. So
That's
we'll
fine.
do an amended agenda. Thank you. Thank you, Greg and Chris. Next, County Administration, and Tracy will present approval of a funding agreement with Clackamas Workforce Partnership for the Construction Career Pathways Program, C2P2. Go ahead, Tracy.
Thank you, Gary. Good morning, Commissioners. Tracy Moreland, BCC Admin. So the Construction Career Pathways Program, this is a funding agreement. It's really the final step needed to move forward with this work. The board approved adoption of the C2P2 regional effort back in November and allocated $50,000 in support of the C2P2 outreach apprenticeship programs, which would be overseen by our workforce board, Clackamas Workforce Partnership. And the funding agreement really just outlines the terms of that arrangement with the board, with the Clackamas Workforce Partnership, and that the monies will be used for the projects that we identified back in November. The specifics are in your packet, but I was able to speak with our chair and Commissioner Schull yesterday, and give them a little more background about C2P2. And if you look at the agreement, it's been approved by County Council, and the funding will come from our lottery budgets. It's also been approved by Laura Zentner from Business and Community Services, and also reviewed and signed by Bridget Daisy, who's the director of Clackamas Workforce Partnership. So we request that this be an item on the consent agenda.
Any questions from commissioners?
I do not see any hands raised.
All right, February 11th, okay, Tracy?
That's fine, thank you so
Okay,
much.
Thank you. Next, Technology Services, and I assume Duke or Dave, both? We don't need both. Who's doing it? Okay, I guess you're both doing it. Okay, this is first, an amended service level agreement with Metro Area Joint CAD System. Go ahead. Dave.
Am I on? Yep. Okay. All right, I brought Duke Dexter with me today. He's my project manager over CBX, and he'll be able to fill you in on any of the detail of all of these. The first one is an agreement to put in some fiber between our 911 center and Magic's, the metro area joint CAD service area that the 911 center does a lot of business with.
Excuse me, Dave, would you speak directly into your microphone? It would help us.
Okay.
Thank you
Is that
kindly.
better? Thanks. And also, Duke would like to request and Tech Services for the Director of Tech Services to be able to sign agreements necessary for the performance of this agreement. And that's basically it.
Questions?
Commissioner Savas has his hand raised.
Commissioner Savas.
Did you mention the dollar amount, or did I miss that?
So I'll take that real quick. So on that piece, the fiber actually is already in place. This is just going to be a new connection. So all we really need to do is one of CBX staff will go down and just plug it in, and they'll be ready to move forward. So there is no dollar amount for the expansion of the network for the service. They will pay $255 a month or $3,060 annually.
So you're seeking an authorization for signing a contract just to make the connection and the relationship then?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
No other hands are raised.
No other hands are raised. Next.
Okay, next, service level agreement with the Lake Oswego School District.
Okay, if you remember, we in the past built fiber into the Lake Oswego schools. And in order for them to get their E-rate from the federal government, they have to rebid that for the service ever so often. And this is just permission for us to bid on that and continue service with our fiber into the school district. Is that right? Okay.
That's correct. The fiber itself is already existing. It's just a continuation of services.
Any questions from commissioners?
I do not see any hands raised.
Gary?
Okay, new service level agreement with LS Networks.
Yes, LS Networks has been one of our partners and our customers for quite a while, and they're requesting additional fiber link. So I believe they wanted to go into fire station in West Linn. Is that this one?
No, that's a wholesale. This is.
Oh,
yeah.
that's a wholesale. This one is to provide connectivity to one of their customers. Anything to add to that, Duke?
Yeah, so the non-recurring fee out of this is $500. We just need to drop an aerial splice case, splice a couple fibers, put it back up. Then they'll pay an annual fee of $4,416.
Okay, questions?
I see no hands raised.
All right, new service level agreement with Wholesale Network LLC.
Okay, this is the one that's going into the fire station in West Linn. We're asking permission to provide this fiber link for this company so they can provide services into the fire station.
Yeah, now on this one here, we actually will have we will have to build a fiber extension into the fire station. Our estimated cost are $19,200. Once we are complete, Wholesale Network will reimburse us for that cost, and then they'll pay an annual fee of $3,160.
Comments from commissioners?
I do not see any hands raised.
Gary?
All right, finally, a new City of Sherwood intergovernmental agreement.
Okay, City Sherwood, that's been one of our partners for a long time, and they actually do lease some of our fibers to get to some locations. We want to be able to partner with them on a conduit build so that in the future, it would be a low cost for us to pull fiber through that conduit and provide services. And I'll let Duke go ahead and give you some detail on that one.
Yeah, so this is over underneath I-5 on Saggart Road, and it'll go from Martinazzi on the west side to 65th on the east side of I-5. It'll include 4,160 feet worth of fiber along with 7 conduits. And so what we'd like to be able to do is kind of pay a fee to help or to get access to that conduit and vault system.
Questions from commissioners?
I do not see any hands raised.
All right, can these all go till February 11th?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, one more, commissioners. Tourism and Cultural Affairs, approval of a lease amendment to the tourism office space in West Linn. Commissioners, my suggestion is today you either decide you're going to return this to an executive session conversation, have a policy session, or go forward with the consent agenda. Not to debate the issue, but rather which of those 3 courses of action would you like to take? That is my suggestion. And Samara Phelps is the Director of Tourism to answer your questions.
Do we have time today, Gary, to do this in a policy session?
You have 25 minutes right now, although you still have commissioner communications. The afternoon, if you're willing to stay after 4 p.m., we could do it after 4 p.m. today.
Okay, I'm going to make it the decision that we discuss it today with the 25 minutes remaining. If we cannot come to a decision, we will take it up at 4 o'clock this afternoon in a policy session. Proceed, Gary.
Samara, would you like to give the board just talked about this, but a high-level overview, especially for the public who may be observing for the first time, what the issue is and what the proposal is, please.
Great. Good morning, everyone. So what we're coming forward is we're requesting the approval of a lease amendment to the tourism offices in West Linn. What this does is it amends the existing lease for the office space to return a portion that is 686 square feet back to the landlord. And that reduces our monthly obligation by 15.3% at this point for our rent obligations.
Dollar amount?
It's about $1,600 right now, a month.
What's your normal rent for that facility?
Just shy of $11,000.
Paid for by what?
Tourism, Cultural Affairs, transient room tax.
Commissioner Savas has his hand raised.
Commissioner Savas, comment.
Commissioner Savas, you're on mute. There you go.
I'm sorry. I thought that Gary's question was whether or not we wanted to do this and either continue on an executive session or to do it in public. And I don't think we answered that question, but apparently we went past that. So with that, I will just, I think it's important to let folks know that the building, as I understand it, Samara, or our portion of the building that we're paying $11,000 a month for is currently vacant. Is that correct?
Our portion is currently vacant, yes.
So it's costing basically tourism development, those public dollars are being expended at the rate of $11,000 a month, and this only reduces it to $1,600 a month. I just want to get, is that correct?
It reduces it by $1,600 a month at the current rate.
So we will still be paying $9,400 some odd dollars or above that.
That is correct.
Okay, just want to get that out there. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Staff, Samara, what was our action? What action did this board take on our very last discussion of this item?
The action on the very last, my understanding of the action of this item was that we would go back and engage in conversations with the landlord about the amendment. We have proceeded with those conversations, and staff recommendation is still that this is a worthy recommendation to do the sublease.
So you recommend that we do the sublease and move forward?
It's a lease amendment, excuse me.
A lease amendment, I beg your pardon.
Yeah. And yes, we recommend moving forward.
Commissioner comments?
I do not see any hands raised.
I recommend that we approve this lease, sublease amendment, And Gary?
So we can put it back on the consent agenda as soon as this Thursday. In fact, because it seems timely, we could, with your permission, Chair, put it on this Thursday's business meeting as a consent agenda item.
We'll put it on this Thursday's business meeting as a consent agenda item. Thank you, Gary. Up next?
Thank you.
Thank you, Samara. That is the consent agenda item list. Again, it took 30 minutes. Congratulations. That's very efficient. The final item today is Commissioner Communications.
Commissioner Communications. You know, I don't have a list, so just raise your hand if anybody wants to speak.
I don't have any hands raised yet. Oh, Commissioner Savas.
Oh, go ahead. Commissioner Savas,
Yeah,
go ahead.
There we go. My computer's a little bit slow. Yeah, I just wanted to just apprise you, last evening was the ODOT's, Oregon Department of Transportation, Region 1 ACT meeting. We meet every couple months. There's a lot of things that are moving in regards to transportation. I-205 corridor, the part between the Abernathy Bridge and the expansion of the bottleneck is one of the projects, the Rose Corridor. And what's been added on to that House Bill 2017, 3 or 4 years ago, what's been added onto that now is a study of the Boone Bridge and bigger, a far more grander project, the Columbia River crossing or the I-5 bridge going over to Washington State, and a number of other projects are being added, and they're significant. And it doesn't appear as though that, I'm not sure if the legislature is going to act or not, or the legislature even needs to act. But what's being proposed right now, beyond the initial tolling discussion that's been happening, is something that was been brought forth called system-wide tolling. And I'm not quite sure, because the way it was couched, and how it was couched last evening, but the concern is that, if they just tolled these freeways, if you will, the concern about the diversion would still occur. So would they have looked into something that possibly would toll our normal roads that we own, I guess. It's not really clear right now what that is, but I just want to apprise you all that if there is a system-wide tolling and our local roads are tolled, which Clackamas County owns a substantial number of those, that's just something that I think we all ought to be aware of. There was what was in the packet for last evening's meeting was not what was presented. There was some new information presented, so I not had a chance to actually vet that with staff. So I was a little bit caught off guard, as were other members, as to what that really meant. So I don't have a complete information as far as answering questions on this topic, but it looks like they're marching forward with that, and funding for 205 and the Rose Corridor and the I-5 bridge and all that don't have a price tag per se. There was a few large numbers put out there, or what that's going to cost, price tag, or what that cost is per either household or per driver. We don't know. I don't know what those impacts are, but that's a lot of money and a lot of projects. So I just want to let you know that might not be received so well. So I'll just leave it there, and when I have more, I'll share. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any other commissioners who have comments?
Commissioner Fisher has her hand up.
Commissioner Fisher.
I don't have any comments on what Paul just said, so if anybody has comments on that, I was just going to have my hand up for Commissioner Communication.
No other hands are up for that?
Okay.
Okay, so I wanted to one of my liaison activities is the supportive housing, as along with the Metro Oversight Committee. And so I just wanted to give a brief just update on where the work is at point. As you may recall, the supportive services homeless measure was passed by the Metro region in May. It provides an income tax on high wage earners and also net business profits on businesses over $5 million. Brenda had sent out information about what that funding source was, last week, when there was some talk that there was an employer payroll tax to fund this measure. So I wanted to make sure that all my commissioners were aware of that. So where we are now in the process is we, as a commission, selected our local implementation team, which is made up of our of folks in Clackamas County to really provide input and oversight on what we are going to do in Clackamas County. And the group has been meeting since for quite some time, and the work has been coalesced all together that will provide the framework for the plan. As part of this process, there's been 17 community engagements, and the highlights of what the community input has been is that in order to address homelessness, and this is going to be like no surprise to any of us because we talked about this all at our retreat, but that there's a gaps in shelter and behavioral health services. There's also barriers for communities of color because there's a lack of culturally specific services, and that the priorities are shelter and behavioral health services. So alongside this effort, our local area, our tri-county leadership has been meeting on system-wide issues and working on the tri-county region, or especially in regards to long-term rent assistance and also on capacity building for culturally specific providers. So that's some good partnership going on then. And let's see, was it last week? My gosh, is anybody in COVID time, our time smear come all together? Maybe it was the week before last. There was a presentation with Jill Smith, Vahid, and myself with the Clackamas County Business Alliance. And a presentation will be coming to this board regarding the intergovernmental agreement and the local implementation plan. One of the key points of this effort, I think, has had some confusion and misunderstanding is while Metro provides the framework, they provided the framework, which was a community-led effort to for this measure. The counties, the local jurisdictions are the ones that are determining how to deliver the services. Metro is not dictating the how, and that's really important for our autonomy in Clackamas County.
Good, that's good news.
I think that is all I have to report at this point, but I'm happy to answer questions if there are any.
It looks like Commissioner Savas has his hand up.
Yeah, it's not so much a question unless Commissioner Fisher wishes to address it. It's more of a comment based on our discussion last week, and that is, you know, the real need we have out there for drug and alcohol treatment centers and mental health facilities and treatment. We discussed that earlier when we were interviewing, or not interviewing, but when you had your discussion with Rich Swift. There is such a demand for that. And I'm just hopeful there's a way, even if it takes some kind of an action or whatnot, that maybe some of these dollars can be put forth for a regional facility that we can share the costs, get economies of scale, and really help the people that are really in need. We rank way down there on the list of states as far as providing that level of treatment, and we ought to be doing better.
Yeah, you know, Paul, I took your question from our retreat and had a conversation with Jill Smith, and absolutely the funds measure can pay for the treatment, which would provide, I expect, some incentive for current providers. Like DePaul is one that does really, really good treatment for the region, and also detox and inpatient types of services. But there may be others. So I think your thoughts and your perspective is really valuable. And I don't know if our other commissioners would be interested, but I would be all about just reserving 30 minutes from our staff to come and talk to us about what's available regionally, what's available in Clackamas County, what's happening at the state level. There's been a lot of work at the state level, and I know the Association of Oregon Counties has been advocating for this, but we could probably use we have some excellent staff that could really help us.
Commissioner Fisher and Gary, that might be a pretty good briefing for our board to have. I know I personally would be interested in that. I think that would be a very healthy discussion. Yep. Commissioner Fisher, if you want to go ahead with that.
Okay, that would be great. Gary, you got it?
And prepare a briefing with you and staff and Gary and do whatever. Do your thing on this.
Sounds great. Thank you. And any other questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'm happy to clear up any misinformation. If I don't have the answer, I will can find it.
Sure,
Yes,
thank
so
you.
I just got one follow-up, Sonia. So it sounds like we have the dollars to provide the services coming, but do we have a service provider to provide the services to receive the dollars to meet the need?
So definitely there will need to be capacity development within the system. Part of the discussion, Multnomah County brought their plan to Metro's Oversight Committee, and what Multnomah County is, which I expect we are going to have to do some as well, is really help our nonprofit sector build the capacity that they need to deliver the services, because we don't have the capacity. And this is a real building of a system of support that will be effective. And so making sure that we do it right and what works specifically for Clackamas County is very important.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher.
Commissioner Schrader has her hand up.
Commissioner Schrader, comments, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to let folks know, after the conversation we had last week with the issue with the turnkey project, and again, citing difficulties we've had both within our urban areas and our rural areas, I've since had conversations with Linn, and that is the nonprofit that's actually dealing with housing and services countywide, not just in the urban growth boundary area. I do want to remind people this is the wraparound services right now are really concentrated within the urban growth boundary. And some of the pushback we got, I did some background work with the Estacada Food Bank, with Linn. I've been in contact with Mayor Drinkwine, because I see an opportunity here that even though these dollars aren't particularly applicable to our rural areas, and despite the fact that turnkeys turned out to be a big surprise to everybody, there does seem to be interest in looking at building capacity out in the rural areas if we can pull together a larger conversation. And I've already talked to Jill about actually contracting and making that happen. Because the issue we're going to be dealing with is if the wraparound services are concentrated in the urban areas, and the folks in Estacada and their group have told me, indeed, they have significant houselessness problems, even based on the number of visitors that are coming to the food bank that they're dealing with. And the whole value that they have there that we heard across the board, even from folks who were not happy with the turnkey proposal, was we take care of our own. So we've been kind of working on to see what that might mean out there, who we can pull together, how that might look for a rural model. And I would strongly suggest that we begin to look at transportation possibilities, because if the wraparound services are going to, that was one of the issues that we heard in Estacada, and one of the dilemmas is the infrastructure. Not only infrastructure, physical infrastructure from their standpoint, like sewer and water and capacity that way, but the notion that there is no infrastructure out there for the kinds of wraparound services that are necessary. So we're either going to have to think about transportation opportunities, and we get people back and forth, or we're also going to have to think with our rural communities, if we can get a larger conversation together with them about how we provide those services there, because it's an equity issue for me across this county. I think for all of us, actually, it's an equity issue that I think we have to pay attention to. So I've been, after a turnkey, that those conversations are happening. So,
good, and we're taking that up later this afternoon, aren't we, Gary?
Yes.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Schrader. I really appreciate that. I can't wait to hear more about this project. Any other commissioners with comments?
Commissioner Savas has his hand up.
Commissioner
I
Savas.
just wanted to just reply real quick to Martha. So TriMet does have transit into Estacada. It's the only rural city that TriMet serves. Granted, It's not very fast. It takes a long time to get from Estacada into the urban area. And as far as all the other services, I think you inferred, you're correct. There's just not much infrastructure there.
Nothing there.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Savas. I think the bus goes out there once a day. Maybe.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, it's very sketchy. Commissioner Scholl, do you have any comments?
Chair Smith, the only comment I'd like to make is that supportive housing is a element of our housing need. But when we talk about housing, we need to also talk about free market housing and what we're going to do in the future to remedy our current housing shortage. And so when we talk about housing, supportive housing comes up so often, but it is a short-term fix for our problem. Free market housing is a long-term fix for our current housing costs and shortage. So I just want to say that in the future, when we talk about housing, let's talk about supportive housing and free market housing. Thank you.
Very good, thank you, Commissioner Scholl. I'm going to be brief here, we're running on the 12 o'clock hour. I had my weekly meeting with the Tri-County chairs last evening and with Leah Horner from the governor's staff regarding the COVID situation. Washington County has moved out of extreme risk into high risk. Clackamas County and Multnomah County are 5 cases from doing so, and it is hopeful, I'm not making promises, that next week we could see a reduction in our risk level. In the past, when we have been close, only 5 cases, we have been allowed to do so. With anticipation that that might happen, I have asked staff to prepare some public service documents or a public service announcement saying, yay, we might be there, which is a really big deal to some of our restaurants and gyms. But please continue in your efforts, in your wonderful efforts on social distancing, keeping track of your health, trying not to spread any viruses at all by continuing to wear masks because we are not out of the woods yet, but that would be quite welcome news. And if we could continue to keep up our really good behavior, that would be just wonderful. With that in mind, I believe we're adjourned for today.
Until 1:30 p.m.
Thank you.